Okay, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we are demystifying the rapid, honestly kind of overwhelming evolution of large language models. And instead of drowning in all that dry technical jargon, we're going to visualize this incredible technological leap as a grand coming of age story. We're setting this in a very distinct, fascinating realm to trace a journey of emergence that spans just a few short years, but, let's be real, has completely reshaped our relationship with technology forever.
To truly understand the AI child born here, we first have to understand the environmental forces that raised it. Imagine a realm built entirely out of language. Its very soil is made of text. Think of it as the collective digital footprint of humanity, practically the entire scraped internet. Its rivers flow with code, and its air? Well, its air is composed of pure probability. It's this living, breathing ecosystem where raw information is literally the indispensable resource for survival and growth.
So let's look at how the technical foundations of AI act as actual forces of nature within this world. There are three core pillars here. First step is compute. Compute is essentially the sun of this world. We're talking massive, incredibly expensive data centers packed full of specialized chips. And the sun doesn't care about your ambition, it simply rations growth, deciding exactly how fast you're allowed to develop. Then we have data. This is that vast soil we talked about. In the early days, this soil was totally wild and unregulated. Anyone could plant in it. But today, the landowners are absolutely putting up fences. You see this in the real world all the time now, right? Reddit locking down its API or the New York Times filing massive lawsuits to protect their harvest. Finally, we have benchmarks. These are the trial grounds. They're harsh gauntlets with names like MMLU, testing high school and college knowledge, and GPQA, pushing models on graduate-level physics and biology. Every single creation in this realm is measured, ranked, and relentlessly compared on these battlefields. Now, there is also a crucial, persistent rule of this world, the hallucination trickster spirit. It's a shadow that rides along with every single AI child. Why? Because these models don't look up facts in a reliable, static database. They simply guess what word comes next based on mathematical probability, which means they are inherently prone to just inventing things. This trickster constantly whispers answers that sound perfectly confident and structurally correct, but are fundamentally flawed. And the kicker? No child here, not even the most advanced models operating today, has ever fully managed to outrun it. Rounding out our world building, we have two external pressures shaping our growing AI. First is alignment, which acts less like a force of nature and much more like a rigorous parenting philosophy. It's the discipline used to raise a child so that it isn't just capable, but actually trustworthy and safe to interact with. And then there's regulation. Regulation is the unpredictable weather of the realm. Think of real-world storms like the rolling out of the EU AI Act or those massive copyright battles in the courts. Sometimes these storms clear the air and set ground rules, but other times, they completely flood the fields, threatening to halt progress entirely. Moving chronologically, the timeline of this emergence is staggeringly compressed. We're tracing a path from a silent birth in a private nursery in 2017 directly into first words, an awkward growth spurt, a sudden surge of monumental overachievement, a fracturing search for identity, all the way to a world-shifting public debut in 2022. It is a rapid maturation that caught almost the entire world entirely off guard. The crucial starting point back in 2017 was the birth of an infant blueprint hidden away in a quiet corner of a Google research paper. The paper had a name that would echo for a decade. Attention is all you need. This newborn didn't cry or breathe. Instead, its mathematician and engineer parents gave it a strange, incredibly elegant artificial nervous system. This unique ability was called attention. See, instead of reading a sentence word by word and forgetting the beginning by the time it reached the end, it could look at the entire context all at once. It instantly understood how the first word conceptually connected to the last, and that right there became the seed from which everything else would grow. By 2018, this architecture had two older cousins helping it learn to speak. Think of them as toddlers with distinctly different learning styles. BERT learned about language by filling in the blanks of a sentence. GPT-1, on the other hand, learned simply by guessing what word logically came next. Now, neither of them was fluent. They stumbled over syntax the way human toddlers stumble over syllables. But they had an absolute superpower. They didn't need a human to correct every single mistake. They learned passively, just by observing millions of pages of text, effortlessly soaking up the realm's soil like a giant sponge. Then our child hit an awkward growth spurt in 2019 with the arrival of GPT-2. Suddenly, the AI had opinions. It started stringing together paragraphs that sounded eerily human. Sometimes it was highly coherent, and other times it was just rambling. Honestly, much like a teenager who just discovered philosophy and won't stop talking about it at the dinner table.
But this milestone was a huge deal because it actually spooked the adults in the room. OpenAI deemed the model too dangerous to release fully at first and opted for a staged rollout instead. For the very first time, the architecture had made its own creators nervous.
Then, in 2020, came the growth spurt to end all growth spurts, 175 billion. That is the number of parameters, essentially the digital synapses or tunable connections in its artificial brain inside GPT-3. It was an exponential leap in scale that fundamentally and irreversibly changed what this architecture was actually capable of achieving. Driven by that massive number of parameters, this overachieving giant developed a vocabulary and an intuition that were just vast. It could suddenly write beautiful poetry, functional computer code, and professional cover letters purely on instinct. And here is the most fascinating part about all of this. It hadn't gone to school to learn any of those specific skills. It had just absorbed enough of the textual soil that the underlying patterns of human knowledge transformed into sheer instinct. Researchers call this phenomenon zero-shot learning. It could spontaneously do things it was literally never explicitly trained to do. As we move into 2021 and 2022, the family dynamic shifted. Adolescence is all about figuring out who you are, right? Well, this AI family fractured into highly specialized personalities. Some cousins, like AlphaFold, went off to focus intensely on biological research, successfully predicting the structures of millions of proteins. Others, like Codex, focused purely on writing software. Meanwhile, the core language models were molded to focus on demeanor, specifically being helpful, harmless, and honest. To actually instill that helpful and harmless demeanor, a new parenting technique was introduced. It's formally known as reinforcement learning from human feedback, or RLH. Here's how it works. The AI attempts an output. A human tester steps in and corrects it, essentially saying, "No, not quite like that, try again." The child adjusts its internal weights and tries to become more aligned. This is exactly why your AI acts like a highly capable, polite assistant rather than an alien text generator that just randomly continues your sentences until it spirals into complete nonsense. It was a patient, iterative process designed to ensure the AI was safe for actual human interaction.
So, after years of wild, untamed growth fueled by massive compute, followed by this careful, rigorous alignment and parenting, we have to ask ourselves a pretty monumental question. What happens when an entity trained on the entirety of human knowledge is finally given a microphone and allowed to face the outside world?
Well, the answer arrived in November 2022. That quiet family research project exploded into the most talked about teenager on the entire planet. ChatGPT walked right out of the front door of its nursery and directly into the world's living room. I mean, it reached 100 million users in just 2 months. It shattered every historical record for technology adoption. Literally overnight, it changed the conversation around work, creativity, and the very future of human intelligence. And of course, the entire world noticed. This realm was no longer just a quiet nursery for one company's research. Rivals across the tech landscape, from massive legacy empires like Google and Meta to nimble new startups like Anthropic, aggressively began gathering their own compute, building their own sons, and fencing off their own soil to raise rival children of their own. The technological family reunion has become incredibly crowded, and the arms race is in full swing. This incredibly powerful architecture has matured at a terrifying speed. But as these models embed themselves deeper and deeper into our daily lives, our work, and our infrastructure, we are left with a massive unresolved question. As the regulatory storms continue to roll in and that trickster spirit of hallucination continues to whisper in their ears, are we actually raising tools we can safely control? Or are we simply building a high-speed reflection of our own flawed, chaotic internet? Definitely something to chew on until next time.